Welcome to the explainer. All right, let's jump straight into this. You know that sharp, sudden pang of irritation you get when someone just blatantly cuts you off in traffic? Or how about that terrible sinking feeling in your chest when a good friend leaves your message on read? Yeah, we've all been there. This kind of daily friction, this interpersonal conflict, it's just a universal human experience. But let's be totally honest with ourselves here. Walking around feeling constantly offended, neglected, or attacked by the world, it is incredibly draining. So today, we're unpacking a really brilliant framework based on the insights of public speaker Frederick Imbo that tackles this exact friction. We are going to break down exactly why we take things so personally, and way more importantly, how we can actually train our brains to just stop. So here's a question for you. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy? It's a fantastic pattern interrupt, isn't it? Because when we feel slighted, our immediate knee-jerk instinct is to dig our heels in and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the other person is entirely in the wrong. But man, constantly battling the world to prove your rightness, it's exhausting. It takes up a massive amount of mental real estate. By the time we wrap up this explainer, we're going to see exactly why choosing to just let go of that desperate need to be right might literally be the ultimate hack for our own happiness and freedom. To really understand how to achieve this kind of freedom, we're going to look at the story of a football referee. Now, the speaker we're referencing, Frederick Imbo, actually took a job as a ref for a mere €20 a match. And he did this deliberately. He stepped onto the pitch to act as a literal human scapegoat, purely to train himself out of taking things personally. Talk about immersion therapy, right? Now, I know most of us aren't exactly volunteering to be screamed at by angry sports fans every weekend, but our everyday lives are packed with triggers that make us feel just as hunted. We're talking about that tailgating driver aggressively flashing their headlights at you in the fast lane. Or the friend who cancels movie plans at the absolute last minute, only for you to see them out to dinner with someone else on Instagram an hour later. Or how about pouring your heart and soul into a huge project, only to have a colleague completely dismiss it, or even worse, just start scrolling on their phone while you're talking? In all these situations, bam, we instantly feel hurt. We feel betrayed, and we immediately think it's 100% the other person's fault for making us feel this way. But let's pause for a second. What is actually happening here? Well, it's our ego speaking. Our ego is that incredibly loud, demanding part of our mind that insists on being taken into consideration at all times. It absolutely despises criticism, and it constantly, relentlessly insists, I am right. So when we take things personally, it's actually not the other person draining our energy. It's our own ego demanding constant validation and trapping us in this exhausting state of feeling attacked. So how do we shut the ego up? Well, Emilo uses this great metaphor of a referee's coin toss, which brings us to our very first strategy. Let's look at the first side of this metaphorical referee's coin, heads. The core idea here is simple but tough. It is not about me. Look, when we feel offended, our default setting is to assume that the other person's actions are a direct, targeted attack on us. But what if their actions have absolutely nothing to do with us? Like zero? To pull this off, we have to make a massive mental shift. We need to move from me, meaning focusing entirely on our own offense and hurt feelings, over to we, which means shifting our focus to trying to figure out their intention. Think about a toddler throwing a colossal tantrum, kicking and screaming, I hate you, just because you told them it's bedtime. Do you take that personally? Of course you don't. You understand it isn't about you, it's just a tired kid who wants to stay up late to watch more cartoons. Well, we actually need to apply that exact same empathetic shift to adults. That tailgating driver we mentioned, they're probably just running incredibly late for something important and are in an absolute panic. It's really not about you. Now, I know what you're thinking. Shifting from me to we sounds super simple in theory, right? But in practice, it is a monumental task, and the reason why is actually rooted deeply in our biology. Think about the number 50,000. That is the estimated number of thoughts your brain produces every single day. 50,000. But here is the catch, and it's a big one. Out of those 50,000 thoughts, a massive 80% are negative. Seriously. Our brains are quite literally hardwired with a negative bias just to protect us from danger. And this is exactly why if you walk into a room and see two colleagues whispering and laughing, your brain naturally assumes, oh great, they're definitely gossiping about me, rather than the 20% positive thought, which would be, oh, they must be admiring my awesome new shoes. Making that shift to a positive assumption, it requires immense discipline and active conscious training because you are actively battling against 80% of your own natural neurological programming. Okay, but let's be real. What happens when you try that first strategy, but the sting is still there?
Well, then we have to flip the metaphorical coin over to tails. And this is the painful twist, guys, because sometimes the reality is it is about you. Sometimes the words people shout at us actually do hurt, and they hurt because they manage to hit a very raw, very real nerve.
To really wrap your head around this, ask yourself kind of a ridiculous question. Why don't you get offended if someone walks right up to you on the street and calls you an orange? Just really think about it. If someone aggressively yelled, "You are an orange," you wouldn't feel crushed, you wouldn't cry, you'd probably just laugh and assume they were totally out of their mind. But why?
Well, the reality is being called an orange doesn't hurt you because absolutely 0% of your brain actually believes that you are in fact an orange. Insults only sting when a part of us actually believes them to be true on some level, or when we feel deeply insecure about them. For example, if someone calls you selfish and it genuinely stings, it's highly likely because you harbor some secret guilt or insecurity that you actually are sometimes selfish and maybe don't always consider other people's needs. The offense is essentially just a mirror reflecting our own internal doubts right back at us.
So where on earth do these doubts even come from? Well, the roots of this thing almost always trace way back to childhood experiences, lingering feelings of inadequacy, and unresolved insecurities. Maybe you were that kid who came home super proud with a 9 out of 10 on a math test, and instead of getting praise, a parent just asked, well, why wasn't it a 10? Something like that plants a tiny insidious seed of, I'm just never quite good enough. So when someone criticizes your project at work today, it bypasses the current situation and touches that exact same raw nerve from decades ago. We can really only take things personally if it touches an insecurity that we just haven't come to terms with yet.
Okay, so what's the actual remedy when it is about us? It boils down to a pretty straightforward two-step process. Step 1, you have to give yourself some empathy. Acknowledge the pain without immediately blaming the other person. Literally say to yourself, ouch, okay, this hurts because I'm longing for recognition and I feel really sad that I didn't get it. Then move to step 2. Speak up and be vulnerable. Communicate your needs, but do it without attacking. Say something like, hey, when you walk away while I'm talking, it really makes me feel like you just don't care about my story. By opening up like that, instead of lashing out, you massively increase your chances of finding actual, true connection and understanding.
Now, beneath both sides of this coin, whether it's about you or not, there lies a really fundamental truth about human worth. And to illustrate this beautifully, let's bring back our referee's initial paycheck.
I want you to mentally picture taking a crisp 20-euro bill and just completely crumpling it up into a tight, tiny little ball. Now imagine throwing it down on the muddy ground, violently stomping all over it and even spitting on it. So now it's dirty, it's battered, it's torn, and it just looks terrible. Now ask yourself, who out there would still want that 20-euro bill? Literally everyone would still want it. And why is that? Because it is still 20 euros. And this illustrates what might be the most important takeaway of all. Whatever anyone does or says to you, you will always keep your value. People in your life might attack you, they might fiercely criticize you, or they might just completely ignore you. They might crumple you up with their words and try to walk all over you. But your inherent fundamental worth as a human being, it never ever decreases, not even a little bit.
Which leaves us with one final profound question to ponder. The next time you are tested out there in the world, the very next time that driver aggressively tailgates you or that colleague blatantly ignores your hard work, what are you going to choose? Are you going to let your ego completely take over, desperately demanding that you are right while draining away all of your energy? Or will you flip the coin, look at their intention, or maybe even face your own insecurities, and choose to be free? The choice and all the peace that follows it is entirely yours.